Everyone. I'm going to go ahead and just pause for about a moment to just allow all the participants to join today's webinar. Just allows a second for people to get added to the webinar. I think we're good. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on ransomware. We are really excited to have you participate in today's event as part of our this year GASB Virtual event. The topic for today, as you know from today's title, is on ransomware. Just to give you a little bit of information on ransomware, ransomware is a form of malware that is most commonly spread through phishing emails, most commonly spread that way. That contain malicious attachments or links. I'm sure you guys have all experienced or heard of that at least. The result of ransomware involves locking or encrypting your systems or files so that you can't access them. To get access back to those systems and files, you're demanded to pay a ransom. You know, in the last few years, there's been a rise in ransomware attacks, and local government agencies have been one of the targets. Why has local governments been one of the targets? You know, some areas cited have been related to outdated technology and inadequate safeguards, and really the budget necessary to provide the security measures. You know, you don't have to look far to see numerous cases from across the country. Some very recent events, I just was looking earlier today and found some events occurring in March for some county and city governments. So there's been a lot of examples and reported cases of ransomware attacks. And actually you can't even find, you don't have to look that far to see some actual small city governments paying ransoms in excess of $500,000 to be able to get their data back. So those are big events that make this and bring this to the center attention of why we want to talk about this today. For today's agenda, we're scheduled for 1 hour. We're going to get the privilege and the opportunity to hear from the City of Galt and their experience with a recent ransomware attack that they went through. We are going to allow at the end of today's presentation some participant Q&A. You know, we really want to hear from you guys on questions that you might have, as I know the whole group participating in today's event will benefit. A few housekeeping items just for you to be aware of. We are recording today's event and we will make that available to you on our website. If you're requesting CPE for today's webinar, we ask that you participate in all of the polling questions throughout. That's how we verify your attendance. If you are participating in today's live event, you will get a CPE certificate in a few days to follow. If you're watching this after the fact through a recording on our CE Manager, you will get access to your certificate upon completing the course. Again, at the end of today's session, we're going to be answering your questions. We would really encourage you to post your questions throughout today's event. If you look at the bottom portion of your screen, you'll see a little icon button that says Q&A. Please submit your questions at any time throughout the presentation. We're going to go ahead and collect those and go through those at the end of today's event. So again, anytime throughout, please post your question and answers. Now, a little bit about the speakers today. My name is Brian Gruber. I'm a partner with LSL CPAs, and I specialize in working with local government agencies. I also oversee our technology team here at LSL.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Brandon Young. I'm also a partner with LSL. I oversee our Sacramento office, our new office a couple of years ago. Typically, for those of you that have attended the in-person GASB updates, I would show you some funny pictures and give you an update, but all I got this time is there's no sports going on in the world, so I'm having a hard time finding things to talk about. Anyways, one of our clients up here is the City of Galt, so I have the pleasure of introducing the star of our show today, Claire Tyson, the finance director from the City of Galt. I'll let her tell you a little bit about herself and about the city and kick us off.
All right, thank you, Brandon. Welcome, everyone. I currently serve as the finance director here at the City of Galt. I oversee the finance, budget, and information technology. Prior to this position, I have about 20 years experience in government finance, along with some professional roles at a CPA firm and a multinational corporation and an information technology company where we focused on government financial applications. My education is around managerial and accounting fields, and throughout this cyber attack here at the City of Galt, I handled the internal communications role of a 3-member crisis decision team. I worked closely with internal stakeholders, along with Department of Homeland Security, California Office of Emergency Services, and local agencies. So a little bit about the City of Galt. We're a small city, population around 26,000. We're located in the valley between Sacramento and Stockton. My team of finance and IT has a total of 17 staff members. That includes 3 IT members, an IT manager, IT analyst, and an IT technician, and that's our team. The city leverages a few specialized consultants under contract to supplement the limited staff.
All right, before we get into the details, we're gonna do our first polling question now. So we're gonna have that pop up just to make sure everyone's here and kind of get us kicked off. All right, so our first question is gonna be, how would you assess your current preparation against a cyber attack? Choices are not prepared at all, somewhat prepared, or very prepared. We'll give you guys 30 seconds or so to submit your answers. All right, give everybody a few more seconds. All right, so it looks like we have about 75% feel like you're somewhat prepared, 8% not prepared at all, and then 18% very prepared. So fairly good mix. Somewhat prepared, I would assume, until you actually experience it, you're not really sure of your level of preparedness. So Claire, now that you've kind of told us a little bit of the background, I think kind of what we're all waiting for and want to hear is what happened.
All right. So the City of Galt was a victim of a cyberware attack at the end of last year. So the timeline, day one, at about 5:15 on a Monday morning, I received a text from my IT manager saying there was a problem with the computer system and all of our IT team were on their way into City Hall. I've never had such a message from IT. All staff, can't be good. So I gathered myself and headed to City Hall. When I got here, IT was already on site. They had unplugged all the servers and were working frantically to turn off or unplug desktops and any other devices throughout the offices. They said, don't turn on anything, unplug all electronic devices. What we knew at that point was that hackers were in our system and we needed to stop the destruction, so stop it from spreading. I'm not an IT person, even though I manage that group, so my role quickly became communications. But how? What do I have in paper form was my first thought. And my assistant had given me a binder of information some time back. So I grabbed it up, and it was a listing of all the director's cell phone numbers. So I quickly added them to my cell phone and sent a text repeating the basic instructions, nothing complicated but clear. Do not turn on any devices. If they're already on, unplug them. As my staff started to enter City Hall for the day, I repeated the same thing to them. Then I checked with the HR department as they came in because they handle all of our insurance for the city. Do we have cyber insurance is my question. And they said, yes. So thank goodness, first good news of the day. Then I called the city manager at home. That conversation was a little more detailed, giving him information on what we knew so far, which was just after midnight on December 16th, a dispatcher and police department received a message on her computer from the IT manager asking her for permission to take control of her device. She selected no. She knew that the IT manager never asked for such control without a phone call first. She then went on with her business. She received a second message a short time later with the same request. She again selected no. What we know now is, unfortunately, her first response told the bad actor that she was there. There was somebody on the other end of the computer. The second response activated the attack. It wouldn't have mattered whether she selected yes or no. Her computer went black and she moved on to another computer. Several hours passed before she contacted the after hours IT line and asked why her computer wasn't working properly. By now, the attack had destroyed all of the PD servers, jumped to the phone server and destroyed that, then to the City Hall servers, which house our email and other applications. The ransomware message showed up on the IT manager's account. All attacks require human contact at the front end and the back end. So the bad actor has to start the process, but it requires a user to invite them in. The term Monday morning now means something very different to the City of Galt IT team. It means be alert, which is what they were Monday morning. By the time the city manager arrived at City Hall that day, IT had been working the incident for more than 4 hours. They had called in a system security expert that we had on a consultant contract. He was now already on site. They had followed an IT incident response plan. I'll talk more about that later. It included notification to our county, Sacramento County, California Department of Justice, California Office of Emergency Services, FBI, and others that were responsible for critical systems. We just notified everybody. An initial briefing was given to the city manager when he arrived on site. At that briefing, it was decided who would serve in what role in the city's incident team. The IT manager was determined to be the technical lead. He managed the IT tasks and resources throughout the process. City manager served as the top decision maker and communicator to those outside of the city, including the press, the insurance company, the city council, all of which were notified on the first day. I, the finance and IT director, was responsible for communications within the city, so the directors and others, coordination of citywide tasks, and collection and reporting of costs. By the end of the first day, we had a sense of the significance of the damage, and we knew this was going to take some time to recover. On day 2, the incident team cleared a back room in the IT area, set it up as a war room, brought in whiteboards, and began recovery plans. We developed guiding themes. We established those fairly early on. And the theme was, for us, it was keep the city open and operating with as little impact as possible to services to the community. So operational priorities were established on the whiteboard. Number 1 was payroll processing. We had a payroll coming up in a week. We didn't want it to appear that we couldn't handle whatever was on our plate. PD communications became number 2. Although our 911 line still worked, that was not impacted. All of our phone lines were down, and there is a great deal of communication that occurs with all police departments throughout the interagencies. And number 3 was to try and bring a computer to each and every department. In addition, flip phones were passed out to each department with numbers shared with community partners and the local newspapers. So we advertised, if you need to contact us, you have to call this number. And then we assigned someone to each phone, and that phone was covered all the time we were open. So it passed from one person to another if need be. Signage was going up at the offices, which were remaining open, and that was to communicate new processes. A daily meeting was established with directors to keep them informed and to help problem solve. Communications became very big. At the city council meeting, which was on the second day of this event, the city manager provided a verbal report to council and to the community, and the meeting was recorded by a third-party provider, even though there was no live streaming for that meeting. Day 2 through 7 were, I call it They're Here, because it brought help from other government agencies, both large and small. On the morning of day 3, I received a phone call from a gentleman from Cal OES saying he was on his way and would be here at City Hall in an hour. I did not know he was coming. He just called and said, I'm on my way. He brought with him a cybersecurity expert from the state and the FBI. Credentials were checked and they were stationed in our war room. Sacramento County generously provided loaner equipment for PD for that communication piece. Department of Justice immediately started testing firewalls. Fortunately, we didn't have any breach in those. Cities close by were calling me, offering assistance. A legal firm was engaged with the assistance of the cyber insurance company, and we selected a firm that specializes in forensic investigations. They began scheduling calls every morning and every afternoon, each day for the next several weeks. 3 officials from the Department of Homeland Security out of Washington, D.C. arrived on site on the 5th day, and they spent a couple of days evaluating, providing guidance. So I would say bring in experts and know your neighbors. Early on in the incident, it was determined that no data was lost or stolen. The quick action of our IT team on Monday morning had prevented the bad actors from completing their process. This was confirmed through the forensic experts, and we communicated that to the public, the council, and all stakeholders. Unfortunately, much of the servers that operated phones, emails, file storage, and other system applications were badly damaged or destroyed. The city had been in the process of converting systems and equipment from the old Windows 7. We still had some of that. And as we restored systems and processes, we had to utilize minimum standards of desktop operating systems at Windows 10 level and at a server 2012 R2. What that means is that we could only restore those servers and equipment at a capacity greater than what we had just left. And we would need to abandon a lot of the old systems and purchase new. The good news was that the city practiced frequent and regular backup of data. Because of this, recovery was focused on restoring systems to be able to access and utilize that data. So on the impact of the attack, imagine coming to work one day and being told, don't turn on your computer, your email on your phone has been disabled, oh, and the phones are all down, and there aren't any scanners working either. How do you even begin your day? This was a challenge for all of our employees here at the city. So our core operating systems were down. They needed to be rebuilt. There was no internet, no email, no phones. Although some applications were brought up quickly, they were not connected to the city systems or electronic records. So PD could submit a report to DOJ, but they couldn't connect it to the city records. The financial system was brought up in less than a week, but on a dedicated internet portal that was not connected to the city operating system. Many of the specialized connections had one computer only with one dedicated connected printer, you know, old school. We recognized early that our greatest challenge in the recovery effort was to bring systems back in a way that allowed us to access and use the data we had in the backups. Although no data was lost, it was not easy to get it back operationally. The recovery efforts focused on the operational priorities that we'd already established and gaining usable data. You know, one example was the state wanted a specific report having to do with our water systems, and we had the data, but we couldn't access it to provide it to them. Another challenge was purchasing. The necessity to purchase services and supplies was immediate. Fortunately, the city had an emergency purchasing policy. The policy stated that the emergency had to be declared, which we did on day one with press release. City manager had already accomplished, had to be competitive as practicable under the circumstances. So we mostly used existing vendors, had to have a written determination. So we created a justification memo template, had to have threshold amounts approved by city manager or city council. So what we did was, since our accounting system was brought up so quickly, we created a prepaid account and set it up in anticipation of getting reimbursement from the insurance. And we developed a documentation process. The purchases followed the emergency purchasing policy and with the justification documentation. This process was reviewed by the insurance carrier so that it would be sufficient for the insurance claim. The purchases were explained in terms of technical necessity, use of the vendor and pricing, and they were all approved by all three of the incident team members. Once we had a sense of the overall cost, it can be significant, the entire purchasing list was sent to our city council for approval. It was about a month in before we sent that to council, and the amount approved by them for the emergency purchases was $759,000. We really had very little revenue loss, with the exception of late fees for utility payments. Our systems were not connected, so we were unable to track payments to customer accounts timely. We knew that we had a lockbox, we had electronic means for payments, we had a drop box, we could do deposits to the bank, but we couldn't really connect them into the system. So we just didn't charge late fees for a couple months. So that was a loss, but it was hard to determine exactly what that was. So we didn't claim that on the cyber insurance. The cyber insurance claims are currently in process, and our deductible on those claims is $50,000.
All right, well, that sounds like quite an experience that I'm sure most people would like to avoid. So, so with that, we're going to jump to our next poll question. All right, so our next poll question is, if you were attacked, which one of these would be the most impacted in your organization? The options being core operating systems and applications, email, phones, internet, or files. We'll give you guys 20 seconds or so to respond. I'll do a few more seconds. All right, let's see our breakout here. So the answers were about 76% said core operating systems, looks like 39% email and files, and then 17% were phones and internet. So a pretty wide range there. Core operating systems out being the most by far. All right, so now that we know what happened, Claire, you probably found yourself wondering, how did this happen to us? How did we get here? So with that, how did you get there, and what did you have to change, moving forward to potentially avoid it again?
Yeah. I think the most glaring reality of all of this was that government does not spend time and money on technology. We spend resources on core services to the community for police and fire, and we cut our budgets for support services such as technology. And we just can't afford to do that any longer. Our systems are out of date and highly vulnerable. Frequently, we allow operational conveniences such as shared accounts and passwords to continue even though they're entry points for bad actors. We are so stretched that we allow training to become less frequent and not mandatory. For Galt, IT had just started a training series, and they had their first event, but it was optional. The person who opened the cyber door was in that training, but it was not ingrained in her to contact IT right away, even though she was suspicious with the request on her computer. More training really could have made the difference. The forensic investigation done for Galt showed that multiple attempts were made in the months leading up to the event. Specifically, the bad actor traffic was found on more than 30 systems in the week before the attack. It is not if you'll be attacked, but when the cyber attack will happen. The City of Galt has spent the last 3 years upgrading systems and implementing best practices, such as the backup of data and the segregation of systems. We were on track with many system improvements, at least those we could afford, and we had cyber insurance. All of these helped lessen the impacts. Within 6 weeks after the attack, the city was up and running with 90% of our systems. The application items that were worked after that time were ones that involved a significant evaluation or process changes. We had some items we totally abandoned and never brought back. So.
All right, before we get to this next slide, we're gonna do another poll question and squeeze one in here so we can pop with the poll question. So this one's a quick one. So does your organization have annual training on security and cybersecurity, and does it include phishing tests? Just a simple yes or no. Everybody, a few more seconds. Wow, right down the middle. So 50-50. So half of you do have training, half of you don't. So that's eye-opening to see, but good to know that this is, I mean, these are real life situations, and this is happening all the time. So in time where it's hard to get budgets and find new funding sources, I would assume a lot of it would want to be spent on training, but it's hard to convince, I'm sure, your governing boards to spend more money on training. So now with all that clear, we know what happened, kind of how you're responding now. I mean, for those listening and just your experience, what would you say biggest lessons learned, key takeaways for you, and things that you would share, with people to either try and avoid it or how they would respond as altogether?
Yeah, we have quite a few lessons learned, and I think that every agency who's experienced this will have a little different take on it, but most of these are fairly standard, I think. First is spend resources on technology. None of us can afford the IT and equipment that we want, but it can no longer be in the back seat. Look at the cost of these security systems and assess the value on your computer infrastructure. Do what you can afford, and be bold in proposing policies and cultural changes regarding the way we think and the way we handle technology. The next one I would say is cyber insurance is worth the cost. Not only is there a potential of reimbursement of the cyber attack costs, but there are experts that your insurance company will connect you with that assist in the incident assessment and containment. Keep the data updated and in paper. We're so trained to put everything in the computer, and the contact list that I was able to pull out was invaluable in the first few hours of our incident. The lack of a paper listing in IT for their inventory of devices, it was all in the computer, and that really slowed us down in our recovery and left us open to surprises. Like we had a police detective who said a few weeks into the process, "Oh, you want to see the laptop too?" Things like that. If we had had an inventory list on paper, it would have been hugely helpful. Have an incident response plan. Most of you probably already have that, but it should be up to date and it should be in paper form. We were fortunate that we had ours in paper form. And it should be an action plan. The action plan really should include decision maker roles. That was really not part of ours. So we had to kind of scurry around in day one and say, okay, who's making the decisions on what? Because things were flying very quickly in those first few days and nobody could have handled all of it. We created the guiding recovery themes, and that'll be different for every agency. I'm aware of one agency here in California. They didn't the ransomware didn't take down all of their systems, just a portion, so they were up and running. So their decision was, let's bring systems up that bring in revenue. So any of their utility payments or whatever, let's bring those up first to limit the damage caused. We decided otherwise. One of those guiding recovery themes is, well, one of the items in this list is communication plan. Some agencies feel like they need to not publicize that they've been hit, and that's common in that sometimes by saying, hey, we've got a ransomware attack, it makes others go, oh, they're vulnerable, let's come get them. For us, we had shut everything down, nothing was running, and it was determined on day one that the city manager was going to put out a press release and say, this is what's happened to us, this is how we're handling it. But every agency would need to look at that differently, but your plan should have a communication plan. An emergency purchasing policy really is a must-have. How do you get emergency purchases approved when you can't do a requisition or a PO? And you have certain policies in place that may have thresholds that you're going to far exceed. So each of these may change depending on the nature of your attack and your particular agency, but the elements should be there. Know your neighbors. The phone calls I received in the first few days from City of Lodi, City of Stockton, City of Sacramento, they provided much needed assistance and also the confidence that we were in the right direction. So these other cities brought in staff for us, they brought in supplies. They just called and said, tell me what you need and we'll supply it. Hugely helpful. And although the experts we didn't even know were going to come in each day of the first week, it was kind of like a treadmill. They each brought an expertise that we desperately needed, whether we knew it or not at the time. And the last thing I would say is train your users. Making technology training mandatory, if you can, is good. Remember, we're all subject to one email, one internet site, or a pop-up like this one. The bad actors are becoming very sophisticated all the time, and the more well-trained we are to know the signs and how to handle them, when the attack does come, the less damage and cost we incur. Here are a few resources. We talked a little bit about how to get updates. The first one is a federal site and provides some great information. Second one is the one recommended by Cal OES to us from California Department of Technology. And then, of course, the Municipal Information Systems Association of California. This is a group of your local agencies that provide information systems to their organizations. There are other specific IT sites that can provide emails. You know, they push out emails to you on different incidents or updates. But these three are, I think, are the most valuable.
Well, great. Well, Claire, thank you for sharing. I wanted to throw a wrench into it. Before we do the last poll question, I wanted to ask you a question just from an audit perspective, you know, doing council meetings, seeing some of the citizens that come to these meetings and, you know, reading the papers, especially some of the papers in the city you work for. What was the immediate reaction of city council and the public? And was it a blame game, or how did they respond?
So I think you'll always get a little bit of a mixed bag with that, but because our city manager reported to council and the public immediately, I think the response was very supportive. The council was very accommodating to the changes we needed to make in the first meeting, which was the second night, and then moving forward. And they actually assisted us in, as time goes on, the patience wanes, right? So the community is like, well, why aren't you answering phones in 2 weeks? Why aren't you, didn't you receive my email? And the council became kind of our advocates, and even the newspaper. So I think part of that was our communicating right up front. Our city manager was providing data to all of them all the way through this process.
That's great. Yeah, I guess as a follow-up question, obviously with this year, before the world came crashing down here in March, have you noticed a different council reaction when it comes to different budget areas as far as specific to technology, or maybe with the coronavirus that you weren't able to see that this year?
That's a great question. What I would say is when we brought the list of costs to the council, they were not surprised. They were very supportive. They didn't pick it apart. They asked some questions, some good questions about certain things, but they were fairly supportive. As far as ongoing costs of technology, yet to see, I would say. We still have budget constraints, and there's always a tendency to say, let's put budget in those direct service areas. And, you know, those administrative groups like IT that are kind of in the back room tend to get their budgets cut more often than not.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious to see pre-coronavirus, you know, if they would have a different take on the budget, but I guess we'll never know, maybe in future years. So, so with that, we'll jump to our last polling question before we get into some Q&A for everyone. So our last one is going to be, do you currently have a cyber insurance policy? And if so, what are the policy limits? So options being no, or yes, less than $2 million, or yes, more than $2 million. I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds or so. All right, we'll go a few more seconds.
All right, and I'll jump in on the response on this one. So yeah, so as you can see, actually about almost 25% of people say they do not have a cyber insurance policy. Very interesting. Looks like the majority do have a policy, and it's less than 2 million. I don't think you indicated, Claire, on policy coverage or the type of cyber insurance you have. You want to provide a little info on that?
Yeah, the cyber insurance we have has it has two different areas. One has to do with the data recovery, and one has to do with business interruption. Both of those have a $2 million limit to them. Ours really was about recovering the data to be able to operate the systems we needed to pull the data back in and have it usable. So we came in well below that, but we really leveraged our existing suppliers and got some great deals on some things. So it could have been a lot more expensive.
Thank you. Just as an additional resource, LSL, we did do a webinar a few weeks ago. We're going to go ahead and put the link up to that in our chat box. But it was on 5 best practices for cybersecurity. And it was really targeted to a remote workforce, but the same themes apply to us all. So that's another good checkout from a technology perspective, maybe some of the things that you'd like to look at. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move into the question and answer period and answer some of your questions. If you haven't had a chance to post those up again on the Q&A box, just feel free to jump in and ask some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and start giving you a couple questions here. And the first one had to do with kind of some resources and contacts. You mentioned that you were involved with a few like Cal OES and Department of Justice. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on maybe some of the specific people you reached out to and what they provided?
Sure. So our biggest concern immediately was the police department, their 24-hour service. If we're going to provide services, we need that connectivity. So reaching out to our county, the county was the one that said, hey, we can supply some equipment that keeps that connectivity. And so on our incident plan, we specified that we notify the county, we notify all of the agencies we have connections with, like through a firewall, et cetera. So Department of Justice, those kinds of folks. From those contacts, we were then getting the phone calls, like the gentleman, hey, I'm on my way to your city. We want to be of help. And they were great help. They helped us look at things kind of with a different eye. I would not have told you that the state of California had an Office of Emergency Services that has specialized area of cybersecurity, but they do, and they're really good. And they showed up and joined right into our war room and went to work. They brought with them a gentleman who talked very little from the FBI, and they gathered information. I don't know what all they did with it, but they gathered information and off they went. Then the Department of Homeland Security actually contacted our city manager through the state and said, this one's big, we'd like to come, we'll be there tonight. And by the time we could answer, they were already on airplanes on their way out here. So we spent the weekend before Christmas with them, and during that period of time, my staff were working well over any kind of 12-hour day and 7 days a week for weeks. But the emphasis was to pull everything back and to utilize those resources. Once we realized that these folks were coming with an expertise we really needed, we tried to take as much time with them as we could and incorporate their abilities in with our recovery plan. Excellent. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it did. And it would be great too if maybe the division of the Cal OES for cybersecurity, if you maybe could provide us a link or contact information, and we might be able to provide it to the participants. That'd be great.
Sure. I think most of that's going to come through that Department of Technology. There's going to be links in there, but I can dig that up. Yeah.
Excellent. You mentioned a little bit about knowing your neighbors and the support that they provided. What was the most valuable aspect of what they provided as additional resource?
You know, I think it's just the willingness to be there was helpful. For me personally, it was having the conversation with a couple of other IT directors saying, what are we missing? Is there, first you're kind of reeling from how did this happen to us to, and are we approaching this correctly? So for me, that was very helpful. For my IT team, they were doing things like calling City of Lodi late afternoon on a Saturday afternoon saying, I've run out of this part, and I can't get that for 3 days. Do you have any? Oh yeah, I'll drive it up to you. Those kinds of things. City of Stockton sent a couple of staff out because we put a forensic item on every device to try and determine which ones were impacted by this attack. And they came out and walked with our guys into every office and helped take care of that.
Interesting, thank you. A little bit about, we talked a little bit about cyber insurance a little bit, so I think that maybe we went into that question well, but what about, what IT software or hardware did you find most valuable after you were hit? I don't know, any thoughts?
So we utilized a company by the name of FireEye, and they had a forensic device, kind of a evaluative tool. They were also, the same tool was being used by Cal OES, and so they were helpful in attaching that to every device. That was probably the most helpful because it gave us a clear indication of which item we can restore and reuse and what item is going into the recycling. And basically what happens is the computers that were left on, particularly in the police department, they were never going to be used again. They were done. And that device really identified what those were. It also provided information to the FBI and others about what was really going on. So I think that's kind of the base tool. Now, in the after effects, we've been looking quite a bit at different kinds of security scans for different kinds of things. Like when my IT director came in during this event and said, we're never using a thumb drive again, we're never using a USB, we're never connecting to any of those ports ever again. I said, hold on. The world of business uses these every single day. So practically speaking, that doesn't make any sense. So once we talked him off the ledge, he started evaluating companies that provided some level of security evaluation before you use that device. And we've settled on something, and we're spending money on that going forward to make sure that, I mean, this particular ransomware attack did not really come through a USB as far as we know, but when we started evaluating, because that evaluation we did on every device, we also did on every thumb drive that anybody, we told everybody, turn them into IT, we need to look at them. And that evaluation showed, some of those 30 attempts. Yeah, so that was his coming in my office saying, we're never touching them again, we're never allowing them again. So we're starting to allow those. So I would say look at your security software that's available, figure out what you can afford and how you can manage it, because some of those security software requires a lot of monitoring by your IT department. If you only have 3 people, you don't have a lot of capacity to monitor. We are leveraging, the state of California has some assistance for all of us through these websites that you can see. And they can do some of those phishing exercises with us, those kinds of things. So we are utilizing some of that too. And they've also offered, they have some training that we might be able to utilize. Our insurance company has offered us training in this area.
Very good, thank you. You know, you kind of mentioned, you were kind of leading into it, but we got a question here that wanted a little bit more information on how they got into your system. You know, what the evidence that you went through to figure things out. How did you identify? How did they create the pop-up? How did this all happen, and how did they get in?
Yeah, great question. So here's what we know. We had some old systems. We were on the verge of correcting that and making improvements. We'd already started that process. There were some internet, people on the internet doing certain kinds of lookups or whatever, and we saw some infiltration through that. They actually were sitting on our system for about a week doing some work before that September 16th date. The pop-up came from that. So they were able to get into the system, create this attached to what looked like the IT manager's account, and pop it up on a computer. And unfortunately, Brandon knows this, unfortunately, because they were on our system for a period of time before the actual attack, we had anything that was done from December 1st through December 16th, we did not restore. So when we restored the data that we had on backup, we intentionally did not restore that 2 weeks. And that's because we knew they were in there for at least a week. We didn't know what other kinds of things they may have hidden there. Unfortunately for our audit, we were rushing to complete it, and we had done all of the remaining items. They were being reviewed by the accounting manager to be supplied to our auditors on Monday morning, which never happened. So we had to double back and start over. And so we restored December 1st data and just had to recreate things. But through the forensic investigation, we were able to identify, mostly it was through the internet, that some of these things there were attempts being made. And unfortunately, it's really hard to control that. YouTube is one of the biggest supplier of training materials, and they're one of the most vulnerable. And it's not just that software, it's any of those. So we know that they came in through an internet site that someone was on. We know that the pop-up that was created was the activation point. Yeah.
That's very helpful, thank you. I guess just, you know, before the attack happened and before you were in this situation, what types of security measures, or did you have security measures? You mentioned a little bit about trying to do training. What about other technical security measures like multi-factor authentication or anything like that that might have enhanced anything? Did you do that before or after?
We had not done that before. We were trying to strip away some very old practices of shared accounts, shared passwords. Those were primarily the only ones left at this point were the ones in PD. So the ability of that employee to go over here and just log into another account, which was really the same exact account that was already infiltrated, all it did was spread it. Those kinds of things we were working on eliminating, but we hadn't yet developed the two-factor authentication we are now. We're much more particular about what we allow on an employee's cell phone, what we allow on our internet sites. Obviously, we have an internal site and a guest internet site. Very particular about that. Whereas before, you know, it wasn't uncommon a few years ago that if you needed something on your computer and you weren't on site, you just called IT and said, hey, can you give me that access code so I can set this up on my computer? And they would do it. We don't do that anymore. You have to bring in your device to IT. You have to be authorized for that software, all of that.
was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
One topic which I think is this is a kind of a great conversation. Now you guys made the you guys went the route of overly communicating, right? Internally and also externally, and not hiding this event. I guess from your perspective, why did you guys go that route?
That's a really good question, because on day one I was thinking, wait, do we want to advertise this? But because everything was off, there wasn't, you can't, it's kind of like you can't hurt me anymore, everything's turned off. And so it became an important element to inform. There was no way of hiding once you say, I don't have email, I don't have phones. There's no way of hiding it, so you may as well just say it up front. So that was a decision made early on, and I think part of it was because we had unplugged everything and we weren't ready to turn any switches on until we figured out how deep it was.
That was from you guys. Were you getting any opinions from the FBI or the state regarding best practices on how to, how to handle that?
Yeah, I think it was the end of day one, maybe. We were sitting with our security expert, the consultant, and the question came up, do we contemplate, we never looked at the email that was the ransom email. And the question was, do we open it up? Do we look at it? Do we contemplate paying the whatever fee they ask for to get our data back? And the security expert very, very calmly said, you don't want to negotiate with terrorists, and this is bigger than you know. And if you do open it and you pay that, they're still in your system. They're still coming back. They see it time and time again. And so we took that advice. We sent the email off to the FBI and we never opened it.
Interesting. Did they advise you on communicating to external parties?
The FBI, by the time they got there, well, they were there on day 3, but they were also very quiet. By the time Department of Homeland Security showed up, a lot of these things were already kind of in play. They did confirm for us that it is a decision made by each agency, and they supported our decision based on our circumstances. I would say that's probably as close as we got. The state of California, Cal OES, they were not in favor of looking at the ransom note and paying it. They know, they've seen it too often. They're still in your system. Just because they gave you back your data doesn't mean they're not there and they're waiting for the next opportunity.
Yeah, and from our experience and things that we've seen both. We've seen government agencies not say anything, and then others that did. And one of the benefits that I think that you have, I mean, this allows you to be a little bit more open and even share in this avenue to help other government agencies across the state that we're working with, and bring to light some of the issues and understand the situation and circumstances. So I think that's a very valuable tool that you're able to provide. We've got a couple more minutes. One of the things they asked about your incident response plan, maybe, would that be something you might be interested in sharing? Do you think there were certain aspects of that are best practices and good?
Yeah, I do. I think that the best place to get that is from particularly the state site. They have some samples in there, but some of that's going to be agency specific. Like, you have to know what all of your systems are and how they connect. Those are things that we don't make public, but every agency will know what those are for their operation. And an incident response plan can be, these resources that I've listed here, or some of the other IT ones, which I can make available, would give samples.
Excellent. And then I think I think this might be our last question, right on schedule. Let me look through here and make sure I'm not missing anybody's question. But here it is. Was desktop and/or firewall antivirus, anti-intrusion in place? And if so, did either of these detect the breach? If so, have you reevaluated these services?
Yeah, good question. We had great firewall security. We had just implemented a couple of things, and it was confirmed for us that those were not breached in any way. They did not detect it necessarily. I'm not sure if they would have had it been done during the daytime when people were really monitoring it. For us, we were relying on our users to contact us and tell us if something was wrong. Going forward, we have external folks from the state, et cetera, who will be monitoring 24 hours a day for us, with us. We'll also be monitoring. So I don't know if we would have known that had it happened during the day, but of course these are intentionally done in the middle of the night, the week before Christmas, when everybody's on vacation or home. It's not an accident that these happen at, you know, around a holiday or on a weekend. What was the other part of that question other than firewall, Brian?
I think you answered the
Okay.
the best of the most of it. Brandon, I guess you have one question.
So my only question just now, given the circumstances now, obviously we're in this environment where a lot of agencies, even on the poll question, a lot of them said they were either somewhat prepared or not prepared at all. And now we've been thrust into this remote environment where a lot of agencies weren't ready for it, didn't have it set up. They're working on VPNs and getting hacked even more so than before. I mean, if you could give them, an agency, one piece of advice that, for one, is losing revenue and already is at a deficit, and also now is remote and being hacked more, I mean, what would your one piece of advice be?
Wow. I think being as prepared as possible. I think training, huge. You know, these softwares are great, but just as fast as you get some of these security softwares in, the hackers are figuring out how to get around them. So training is just so big for everyone. You know, knowing that, wait a minute, that doesn't look quite right. I need to contact someone right away. The earlier you catch these, the better off you are. So I would probably say training, but there's so many elements of this.
No, that's.
I think you hit it on the head right there. That's a really key aspect of this whole thing. So, well, thank you so much, Claire, for sharing your experience. I think we all, you know, have benefited and learned from it, and appreciate your time with us today. If you do have any follow-up questions or comments, you can visit our website, email us, and we're happy to get more information. So again, thank you so much for attending today, and excited you could participate. So thank you. Bye.